The little boy was super excited for the arrival of his new baby sister, but when the baby is born and he hugs her, he immediately says, "She's not my sister, Mommy." Ethan, at 7 years old and bursting with enthusiasm, accompanied his mother, Audrey, to one of the last appointments before the birth of his much-anticipated baby sister. At 8 months pregnant, Audrey was already feeling the anxiety build up, but the one truly counting down every second until Claire's birth was Ethan, who could barely hide his excitement. As soon as they entered the examination room, Ethan stayed close to his mom, watching every movement. Dr. James, smiling, noticed the sparkle in the boy's eyes and, after performing the routine checks, joked, "It looks like we have an eager big brother here, don't we?" The boy smiled shyly but couldn't hide his curiosity. The doctor, seeing how excited Ethan was, leaned toward him and said, "Would you like to hear your sister's heartbeat?" Without a second thought, the boy eagerly nodded. When the rhythmic, soft sound of Claire's heartbeat echoed through the room, Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes shining with emotion. "Is she going to be born today, Mom?" he asked hopefully. Audrey smiled, gently caressing his face. "Not yet, my love, but soon. We have to wait just a little longer." Dr. James, overhearing, added with a smile, "The next time I see you, Audrey, will be to bring Claire into the world." On the way home, Ethan couldn't stop talking about Claire. As soon as they arrived, he ran to his father Calvin's office, excitedly announcing, "Dad, I heard Claire's heartbeat. She's almost here, did you know?" The boy spent the rest of the day talking about his little sister, already imagining what it would be like to play with her, take care of her, and even protect her. His parents watched him in awe, hardly believing the dedication Ethan was showing. When night fell, he surprised his parents by breaking open his piggy bank and asking to go to the mall that weekend. He wanted to choose a special gift for Claire. Audrey and Calvin, touched by his gesture, promised to take him. From that day on, the topic of conversation at home was always Claire, and Ethan never tired of asking, "Is today the day she'll arrive, Mom? Will it be tomorrow, Dad?" Each time his parents explained that the big day would come soon, and each time Ethan responded with the same phrase, insisting that when his little sister was born, he would be there to protect her and take care of her. Finally, at the 41st week of pregnancy, the long-awaited moment arrived. Calvin had gone out to pick up dinner when Audrey felt the first contractions. Realizing the intensity of the pain, she understood that Claire's birth was imminent. The problem was that her phone was charging in the bedroom, and she couldn't reach it. "Ethan, come here," she called, trying to stay calm. The boy, who had been playing in the living room, quickly ran over when he heard his mother's anxious voice. Seeing that she was in pain, he understood what was happening and didn't waste any time. He went to the bedroom, grabbed the phone, and called his dad. "Dad, hurry home." "I think Claire is coming," he said, urgency in his voice but still steady. Calvin returned as quickly as he could, and the three of them got ready for the moment. Ethan carefully picked up the bag with Claire's things, and in the car he held his mom's hand, trying to comfort her as she breathed deeply. The boy repeated, "It's going to be okay, Mom. I'm here." Arriving at the hospital, a team of nurses promptly assisted Audrey, placing her on a stretcher and taking her to the delivery room. Another nurse went to call Dr. James, who was already on standby for the call. Ethan, watching his mom being taken away, held her arm tightly and said with conviction, "Mom, I want to see Claire being born. I promised I'd protect her." With an emotional smile, Audrey replied, her voice slightly trembling from the pain, "I know, my love, but you'll meet her very soon." A nurse approached and explained to Ethan that he couldn't enter the delivery room. Though reluctant, the boy waved goodbye to his mom as she was taken away. Shortly after, Audrey's sister arrived to take care of Ethan and keep him company. Calvin then accompanied his wife into the delivery room. The boy didn't seem very happy, staring at the closed door. He murmured to his aunt, "I should be in there. I'm the big brother. What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing bad is going to happen, my dear. Let's keep positive thoughts, and soon Claire will be here with us," Ethan's aunt said kindly, trying to calm the boy as he anxiously looked down the hallway. She knew how nervous he was, and after a few minutes, she managed to distract him by changing the subject. "So, tell me, Ethan, what are you going to do when you're officially the big brother at home?" she asked with a smile. Ethan's eyes brightened at the question. "I'm going to help Mom take care of her, put on cartoons for her, and teach her everything I know. I'll teach her how to ride a bike and even how to draw with chalk." Seizing on the boy's excitement, his aunt suggested they make a list of everything he wanted to do with his sister. Ethan loved the idea and asked for a pen and paper. He sat next to his aunt, focused and full of ideas. However, a few minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps caught his attention. A group of nurses passed through a distant corridor, pushing a stretcher with Audrey, who looked visibly pale and breathless, her expression a mix of pain and worry. Seeing her like that, Ethan felt his heart tighten. Instinctively, he tried to run to his mother, but his aunt held him back, wrapping him in a firm hug. "It's okay, my dear. Everything will be fine. The doctors are taking care of her," she said, trying to remain calm. As Audrey and the medical team disappeared down the corridor, Calvin emerged, looking stunned. Ethan's aunt rushed over to him, asking Calvin what happened. "Is everything okay?" Calvin took a deep breath and, trying to reassure them, quickly explained, "Audrey is having a few issues. It looks like Claire is in a position that isn't ideal for delivery, but everything will be fine. They're moving Audrey to another room to finish the delivery there." Ethan, still with his face buried in his aunt's embrace, whispered worriedly, "Auntie, what's happening with Claire and Mom?" Sensing the boy's fear, his aunt responded gently, "Don't worry, my dear. Your mom and Claire are being well taken care of. Your dad and Dr. James are with them. Everything will be okay." Hearing the name of their trusted doctor, Ethan seemed to calm down a bit. He had attended all the checkups and already considered Dr. James a friend. "How about we finish your list?" his aunt suggested, seeing that the idea still excited him. Ethan nodded, and the two returned to the waiting area. About an hour later, Calvin reappeared in the corridor, a smile on his face. Ethan's aunt asked how the delivery went, and he explained that there had been a slight complication. Claire had swallowed a bit of fluid and was rushed to the neonatal ICU, but she was now fine and had just been taken to the room to be with her mother. He also mentioned that he managed to get special permission for Ethan to visit Claire and Audrey, since children typically aren't allowed to visit. "So, Ethan, shall we go see your little sister?" As soon as Calvin finished speaking, the boy jumped up from the bench and sprinted down the corridor, bringing smiles to his father's and aunt's faces. When he entered the room, Ethan didn't even ask how his mother was, he just wanted to see Claire. Calvin pointed to a chair, telling the boy to sit down so he could place the baby in his arms. Ethan obeyed eagerly, but as soon as the baby was placed in his lap, he grew quiet, an unexpected silence filling the moment. "Is everything okay?" my love, Audrey asked, puzzled by her son's sudden introspection. Ethan looked at his mother with a confused and serious expression and whispered, "This isn't my sister, Mom." Everyone was momentarily stunned, thinking that perhaps because she was a newborn or due to his anxiety, Ethan might have imagined something different from reality. "Of course she is, my love. She just came into the world, which is why she's so tiny. She'll grow soon enough to play with you," Audrey said gently, trying to restore her son's excitement. But Ethan insisted with a serious and determined look on his face, "No, no, Mom. I know that this isn't Claire. I'm sure she's not my sister." The nurse present noticed the tense situation and tried to help. "Look, this is normal. Sometimes children create a very distinct image of what they expect, and they might be surprised when reality doesn't match. But over time, everything works out. When you get home, let him spend some time close to the baby, and you'll see it'll all be fine." Ethan's parents decided to follow the nurse's advice. Since it had been a natural birth, it didn't take long for mother and baby to be discharged. They gathered Audrey's and the baby's belongings, thanked everyone at the hospital, and soon they were on their way home. They hoped that once they were back in their familiar environment, Ethan would eventually realize that this was indeed the little sister he had been eagerly waiting for. After all, they had prepared everything for Claire's arrival with Ethan's help. The shared room was decorated with new toys and baby girl clothes, all waiting to be used for the first time. But things didn't go quite as expected. In the first week at home, Ethan remained distant, almost apathetic. He showed no interest in holding his little sister, didn't offer to help his mom with Claire's care, and seemed constantly distracted, always deep in thought and wandering around the house. Concern began to grow in his parents' hearts, and Audrey and Calvin realized that this wasn't just a passing phase. Ethan truly believed that this wasn't his sister. After a week of this behavior, they decided to sit down with him for a serious conversation. While Claire was sleeping, they called their son into the living room. "Son, we've noticed that you've been a bit sad and distant," Calvin said, trying to approach the subject gently. "We want you to know that nothing has changed. We love you just as much as we always have. Claire also misses you." Ethan, always observant and mature for his age, looked at his parents with determination and responded, "I'm not jealous. It's just that the baby here at home isn't my sister." Audrey, surprised, asked, "But Ethan, why do you think she isn't Claire?" He sighed as if trying to find the right words and finally said, "I don't know how to explain it, Mom. I just feel that she's not the baby I used to sing to sleep when she was in your belly. It's not the heartbeat I heard when we went to the hospital. It's not Claire, and I'm sure of it." His parents exchanged glances, unsure how to deal with what seemed like such a strong yet strange conviction. Ethan continued insisting for days that this wasn't his sister, saying that his parents should go back to the hospital and bring home the right baby. Because of their son's behavior, Calvin came up with an idea that might put an end to this absurd thought in the boy's mind: a DNA test. Trying to explain to his son, he asked, "Ethan, have you ever heard of a DNA test?" The boy shook his head, not understanding, so his father continued, "It's a blood test that allows doctors to study our genetic information. With it, we can be sure if someone is really related to us or not." Calvin suggested to his son that they return to the hospital for the test, but on the condition that after seeing the results, Ethan would put this doubt aside and accept the baby as his sister. Ethan, being very smart, quickly decided to research the DNA test. Even at just 7 years old, he looked up videos on the topic, and afterward, knowing that the test would give a definitive answer and put an end to the situation once and for all, he agreed promptly. The next morning, Ethan's parents called the hospital and scheduled the test for the earliest available time. The blood test was conducted, and now all they could do was wait for the results. A week passed, and finally the hospital called, asking them to come in to view the outcome. In the waiting room, Ethan seemed calm, confident that soon everything would be resolved, and the truth about his sister would be confirmed. Audrey held the baby in her arms as she and Calvin reminded their son repeatedly about the agreement they had made. Once they saw the results, Ethan would have to accept the baby as his sister and put aside any doubts. After a few minutes of waiting, Dr. James finally entered the room, inviting the family to follow him to his office. Once there, he closed the door, his expression serious but direct. Carefully, he explained that there was something unexpected in the results. "I'm sorry to inform you, but the baby is indeed not your child. It appears there was an accidental swap on the day of the delivery. I take full responsibility and will do everything to ensure you receive answers," he said. Pale with shock, Audrey and Calvin remained silent, while Ethan simply whispered, "See, I told you, she's not Claire." The doctor then left the room to request access to the security cameras and promised that the security guard would help them review the footage. Shortly after, he returned with the security guard, who began accessing the camera footage right there in the office. Together, they watched the recordings from the day of the delivery. It didn't take long for them to notice that during a moment of distraction, one of the nurses seemed to have intentionally swapped the babies. The tension in the room escalated, and upon seeing the scene, Audrey began to feel faint, needing a moment to compose herself in another room, accompanied by Ethan. Calvin, trying to stay calm, asked the security guard to zoom in on the nurse, and they managed to read the name on her badge, Melissa. Hearing the name, Calvin looked confused, but before he could process it, Dr. James called the nurse into the office to clarify the situation. A few minutes later, Melissa entered the room. As soon as Calvin saw her, he was stunned, recognizing the woman immediately. She was the same nurse who had assisted during the delivery and the one who had suggested they let Ethan spend time with the baby so he could get used to his sister. Now, as he looked at her, something about her expression felt eerily familiar. Intrigued, he asked her to remove her cap, glasses and mask. Melissa hesitated, trying to avoid it, but realizing she had no choice, she complied. When Calvin saw her full face, it felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Melissa was, in fact, his ex-wife. Calvin immediately understood what had happened. In the past, during their marriage, they had always argued about his reluctance to have children, and now it seemed Melissa had plotted her revenge. Furious, Calvin confronted her right then and there. "Do you realize what you've done? This is cruel. Your behavior is unacceptable and immature, especially coming from a healthcare professional." Melissa lowered her head, ashamed and speechless. The head nurse, who was present, instructed Melissa to gather her belongings and leave the hospital immediately before being escorted by security to the police station to face legal consequences for her crime. After Melissa was escorted out, Dr. James turned to Calvin, trying to reassure him. "We'll solve this. I'll immediately contact the family that your baby was taken to, and you'll have the real Claire in your arms before the end of the day." Calvin nodded and, grabbing 2 cups of water from the corridor, went to where Audrey and Ethan were waiting. He explained everything that had happened with Melissa, reassuring his wife and son. Together, they waited in anticipation for the moment they would finally be reunited with their daughter. While they waited, now calmer after the events, Ethan's parents realized that their son had been right from the beginning. They looked at him with affection and apologized for not believing him earlier. Ethan, with a forgiving smile, replied that it was okay and that all he wanted was to see his real sister. Audrey, still somewhat shaken, reflected on how she hadn't noticed the baby wasn't hers from the start, but quickly understood that she too had been a victim of a cruel deception. She felt relieved knowing that soon she would finally be at peace, with her family whole and safe. Moments later, Dr. James returned to the office, informing them that the other family had arrived and invited them to go to the maternity ward for the exchange. Upon seeing the young couple carrying the baby, Audrey and Calvin noticed the shared shock, and at the same time, the empathy in the eyes of the other child's mother. With the baby in her arms, Audrey stepped forward and, with a smile, said, "Thank you for taking care of my little one." The other mother, visibly moved, smiled back and replied, "Thank you too. I know this has all been a mix-up, but now we have our true daughters, and that's what matters." The 2 mothers then exchanged the babies. The moment Audrey held the real Claire in her arms, she felt what her son had been trying to describe all along, a deep connection. She knelt down so Ethan could see his little sister, and the boy smiled, relieved and excited. "It's her, Mom. It's Claire. Isn't she beautiful?" Everyone around felt the relief and joy filling the room, finally transforming the tense atmosphere into a moment of pure love and gratitude. Embracing the happiness of the moment, Calvin invited the couple for coffee at the cafe next to the hospital. They accepted, and after thanking Dr. James for all his help, they walked together to the cafe, where a new and strong friendship was born amid the unexpected circumstances.